I'm Stephen Bischoff with the Ohio Young Birders Club, and this is Dr. Jed Burt with Ohio Wesleyan University. He's just written a book on Alexander Wilson. What interested you in birding?
Well, that's a tough question to answer because I started watching birds, at least noticeably from the standpoint of adults, when I was 2. So I can only tell you that my mother said I spent a lot of time watching birds. Whether you call that birding or not, I'm not sure, but that's when it started.
What birds have you studied and or raised?
Well, I don't tend to follow single species very much, my master's work was on barn swallows and tree swallows. My doctoral work was on warblers, about 40 species that I observed in the field, comparative study. Since then I've studied gulls, kittiwakes, for example, and, oh golly, I don't know if I can even tell you all the things of different species. I tend to jump around on species. Right now I'm studying the exotic starling.
What started your interest in Alexander Wilson?
Well, that is a long story. The first I knew about Alexander Wilson was the summer between my freshman and sophomore years in college. And what happened was that I got a small grant to go to a field station on an island in the Bay of Fundy. My freshman roommate, had been there the summer before, and he knew that it was a sort of far out, lonely place, and if it was rainy or foggy, it could be pretty isolated. So he found a biography of Alexander Wilson remaindered in a garage sale or a book sale or something, and bought it for me for my birthday. So that was my first contact with Wilson. About 15 years later, I didn't have anything particular to present at the Wilson Ornithological Society meeting, so I decided, well, nobody has ever talked about Alexander Wilson at these meetings, so I'll prepare a poster on Alexander Wilson, which I did, presented it. That gave me something to do at the meeting that year. And then it was about 10 or so years after that, I got a call from the librarian at Harvard saying that he would like to know if I could identify some artwork that they had been given that was anonymous, but they thought might belong to Alexander Wilson, and could I come and identify it? So I asked him, well, why are you calling me? And he said, well, we talked to some people at the Wilson Ornithological Society, and they said you were the expert on Alexander Wilson. This, mind you, is because of one poster. One poster. But I decided, why not? I'll go. I did. I worked with the art. I saw all the artwork they had of Wilson's that was not published. That certainly created a base for publishing. I published a paper on the artwork that I was called in to identify. The painting was not Wilson's, but the doodling in the school notebooks was. And that started me thinking about writing a book on Wilson. So in 2006, I spent 5 months at Harvard researching and starting to write, and then went back in 2011 to go on with the project. I also spent some time in Scotland researching his background, his life. And that's how it started. Sort of accidental in the beginning, and then sort of, what else am I going to talk about this year? And then this weird call, and I still can't believe they actually called me.
When did you decide you wanted to be an ornithologist?
Right after I came back from my summer in the Bay of Fundy between my freshman and sophomore years. I probably thought I'd like to be an ornithologist, but I was convinced by my family that I should be an MD. And I talked about being an ornithologist, but my father said, well, how are you going to earn a living as an ornithologist? Which is a common parental reaction I've found to my students who decide this is what they want to do. And since I didn't have a good answer for him, I just sort of said, well, I could be a doctor, I guess. And after that summer, the thing was, my freshman year, I got a job at the college recataloging specimens in their collection. I got paid for that. And then I took the ornithology class, but because I was already a bird watcher, I got hired as the teaching assistant. This was a college like Ohio Wesleyan, so we didn't have graduate students. So I was the most knowledgeable person they had, even though I was in the class, so they just hired me to lead the labs, 2 of the labs, and the other 2 the professor took by himself. And then I got paid to go to the summer field station, and upon returning to campus I got hired to move the museum collection, and I was beginning to think, gosh, I've been paid for a year now for doing bird stuff. Not a lot, mind you. I mean, even by 1967 standards, it was not a lot. But the point was, I'd been paid. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be an ornithologist. I can get paid for doing this.
What was the most rewarding project you've ever worked on?
Well, golly gee, most rewarding project. Well, in some ways my doctorate, because many things worked that I wasn't sure would work. So that was rewarding, but what I'm doing now is really very rewarding in that when we started studying the microbiology of the plumage, nobody paid any attention to it. And now there's a whole literature in ornithology on it, and the microbiologists actually know that birds carry microbes that are very interesting.
Did you ever have a project that did not go as planned?
Oh, quite a few. Sure, when I was doing my master's work on swallows, one of the things I wanted to study was how the parents recognized the young after they left the nest. The problem was that initially I didn't come up with any way that I could identify the young out of the nest after they leave. And then I finally figured out a way to make it work. But it also produced some interesting results where what I did was I took color bands, I punched little holes in them with heated pins and tied nylon line through them, and then put them on the legs of the young, so the young couldn't really go anywhere. They were 1 centimeter long lines, and the young were then tethered in effect on a beam in a barn. So I was simulating what it was like for the young to leave the nest, only I had them leave to see if the parents could recognize them. And what was so interesting about it was that the young would beg from the adults coming in. The adults would sometimes land and feed them, sometimes they would land and peck at them and then feed them. I had one chick that was being pecked by one parent and fed by the other at the same time. So it was, I mean, the results worked out pretty much as I expected, but the parents didn't behave precisely the way I was expecting.